Right now, you are sitting somewhere with light, maybe a screen, maybe a bulb above your head. You have never once had to think about what happens when that light disappears. But for every human who ever lived before you, darkness was not an inconvenience. It was a wall, a 12-hour wall that dropped every single night, and your ancestors had to live inside it. The question nobody asks is what they actually did in there. The answer is stranger, deeper, and more human than anything you were taught in school. Let's go back. Not hundreds of years, hundreds of thousands. For roughly 300,000 years, Homo sapiens lived without a single artificial light source. No bulb, no candle. For most of that stretch, not even reliable fire. When the sun dropped below the horizon, the world did not dim, it vanished. Researchers who study isolated communities without electricity describe a darkness so complete that you cannot see your own hand touching your own face. Not dim, not shadowy, gone. That was the default human experience every night for almost the entire existence of our species. And inside that darkness, an entire civilization of behavior evolved that we have almost completely forgotten. The first thing ancient humans did at night was survive. This sounds obvious until you understand what nighttime actually meant on the African savanna. Every predator that hunted humans was built for the dark. Leopards, hyenas, lions, wild dogs, their eyes were designed for low light in a way human eyes simply are not. After sunset, the hierarchy of the food chain flipped. Humans, who were dangerous and coordinated during the day, became vulnerable and nearly blind at night. The solution was fire. And fire did not just solve the predator problem, it rewired what night meant entirely. The earliest confirmed evidence of humans controlling fire comes from Wonderwork Cave in South Africa, approximately 1 million years ago. But fire became widespread and reliable much later. When it did, something extraordinary happened. A campfire creates a circle of safety roughly 9 meters in diameter. Inside that circle, almost no large predator will approach. Outside it, you are exposed. This circle became the defining geographic unit of human social life for hundreds of thousands of years. Everything that made us human, language, culture, memory, imagination, was forged inside that 9-meter ring of light. But fire did something beyond protection. It donated time. Before controlled fire, the useful human day ended at sunset. Depending on the season and latitude, that gave your ancestors somewhere between 8 and 12 hours of functional daylight. Fire extended that, 2 hours, sometimes 4. Suddenly, there were hours in the day that had never existed before, hours with no predator circling, no foraging to do, no immediate survival task demanding attention. For the first time in the history of any primate on Earth, there was free time. And what humans did with that free time changed the species permanently. Anthropologist Polly Wiesner spent years living with and recording the Jahansi Bushmen of the Kalahari Desert, one of the few remaining groups still living close to the original human pattern. She published her findings in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences in 2014, and what she found was a clean split. During daylight hours, roughly 80% of all conversation was practical. Who is hunting where? Which water source is still holding? Disputes over resources, logistics, work. But when the sun went down and the fire came up, the character of conversation shifted completely. More than 80% of nighttime talk was stories, not gossip, not planning. Stories, myths about where the world came from, tales of ancestors who did impossible things, accounts of people in distant places no one in the group had ever met, jokes that made the whole camp laugh until they had to stop to breathe. Wiesner argued that this was not entertainment. This was the mechanism by which human culture was transmitted and built. The campfire was the original classroom, the original archive, the original place of worship. It was where humans learned to hold in their minds things that were not physically present, other places, other times, people who were dead, people not yet born, concepts that had never existed before. The capacity to imagine beyond the immediate present, the thing that separates human cognition from every other animal on Earth, appears to have been trained and sharpened every single night around a fire for hundreds of thousands of years. But storytelling was only part of what the night contained. There was something else happening inside those dark hours, something that modern science only stumbled onto in the last few decades and still has not fully absorbed. You were not built to sleep the way you currently sleep. The 8-hour continuous block. the alarm, the immediate jump into daylight. This is not how human sleep evolved. It is a very recent invention, and it may be quietly damaging you in ways researchers are only beginning to measure. In 2001, historian Roger Ekirch published research that had taken him 16 years to assemble. He had combed through diaries, court records, medical texts, prayer books, and personal letters spanning several centuries across multiple cultures. What he found, buried in plain sight across more than 500 separate historical sources, was a pattern no one had named. Humans did not always sleep in one block. They slept in two. People went to bed shortly after dark, slept for roughly 4 hours, then woke naturally. They remained awake for 1 to 2 hours in the quiet middle of the night. Then they slept again until dawn. This pattern had its own vocabulary. They called the first period the first sleep, the second period the second sleep, and the hours between them had a name too. They called it the watch. What did people do during the watch? Everything. Historical records describe neighbors visiting each other in the middle of the night. Couples conceived children during this window, with physicians of the era recommending it specifically because they believed the body was in an optimal state. People prayed, people wrote. Medical manuals from the 1500s explicitly recommended the watch as the ideal time for serious thinking and reflection, because the mind, they wrote, was calm, and the world was still, and the thoughts came cleanly. Then, in 1992, psychiatrist Thomas Ware at the National Institute of Mental Health ran an experiment that confirmed everything history had been quietly saying. He took volunteers and removed all artificial light from their environment. For 1 month, they experienced 14 hours of darkness every night, approximating the conditions of pre-industrial and pre-fire human life. Within weeks, without any instruction or suggestion, every single participant settled into the same pattern: 4 hours of sleep, 1 to 3 hours of calm wakefulness, 4 more hours of sleep. Their bodies found the rhythm on their own, as if it had been waiting inside them the whole time. But Ware did not stop there. He measured what was happening in their bodies during the wakeful period. What he found was not ordinary wakefulness. Their brains were producing elevated levels of prolactin, a hormone associated with meditation, deep relaxation, and states of quiet internal focus. The participants described the experience as unlike anything in their normal lives: peaceful, expansive, almost hallucinatory in its stillness. It was not a gap in sleep, it was its own distinct state of consciousness, a state that most modern humans have never once experienced because artificial light eliminated the conditions that produce it. So your ancestors were spending 1 to 2 hours every single night in a naturally induced meditative state that modern neuroscience can barely reproduce in laboratory conditions. They were not trying to achieve it. They were simply living in darkness, and darkness gave it to them automatically. And then we turned on the lights and it disappeared. The transformation happened gradually, then all at once. Street lamps arrived in European cities in the 1600s. Cheap candles followed. Gas lamps in the 1800s, then Edison's electric bulb in 1879, and within a single generation, artificial light was everywhere, and the architecture of the human night that had been stable for 300,000 years collapsed in a historical instant. Your body has not caught up. It was not designed to receive bright light at 10 p.m. When light hits the retina, the brain interprets it as daytime and suppresses melatonin production, the hormone that initiates and regulates sleep. Your circadian rhythm, calibrated across millions of years of evolution, reads a glowing screen the same way it reads the sun. The result is fragmented sleep, delayed sleep onset, and the permanent elimination of the second sleep cycle and the meditative watch that came between them. Researchers have found that 1 week of camping with no artificial light resets the human melatonin cycle by nearly 2 hours. 1 week. That is all it takes for 300,000 years of biological programming to reassert itself. The body remembers. It is waiting. What this means is that the modern epidemic of 2 a.m. wakefulness that millions of people experience as insomnia may not be a malfunction at all. It may be the body attempting to return to its natural architecture, the first sleep completing itself, and the system preparing for the watch, the quiet hours that were supposed to follow. The disorder is not in the body, the disorder is in the light. Ancient humans spent their nights in a rhythm that took hundreds of thousands of years to build. They gathered in firelit circles and told the stories that built everything we recognize as civilization. They moved lived through a two-phase sleep, with a window of conscious stillness in between that gave them access to a state of mind we now pay thousands of dollars to approximate through meditation apps and wellness retreats. They lived in darkness so absolute that the sky above them was not a faint smear of light pollution, but a blazing, crowded map of the entire galaxy, visible every single night. We replaced all of it with a switch on the wall, and almost no one noticed it was gone.